Digital advertising and marketing is the future. You can do small things like improve 1% per month and experience tremendous results. So get a good partner in the space, keep investing with it, and don't rest on your laurels.
Hey, Brian, glad to have you on the show today.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited because today we're going to talk about some things that I think the industry is still not adopted enough of and gotten involved with. But I guess before we get too deep in the weeds, I'm always curious, how did you kind of get wrapped up in the whole construction space?
Yeah, it's a great question. I never had any intent or history being in home builder world or development world. Out of graduate school, I got tied in with a builder who had like a leadership rotation program. And at the time, they needed some marketing help at the corporate office. So that's kind of where I landed, had some aptitude for it and interest in it. And that's where I stayed. So worked on the builder side for a handful of years and then transitioned to the agency side.
Gotcha. Cool. And so, yeah, how long you been doing the agency thing?
Specifically on the agency side, about 6 years.
Right on. Yeah. And I guess as we dive into marketing, like that's a fast moving industry. I feel like there's always a lot that's changing, especially now that digital is so prominent. But what are you getting excited about right now with things in the digital space?
It seems like early on it was making the case for digital in and of itself, and now
I remember that.
it's a foregone conclusion for the most part.
Yeah.
I guess the coolest part is actually getting down into the optimization realm, and then also the automation realm. So taking some of those routine tasks and automating them on the advertising front or email marketing front, and then also just traditional lead optimization and website optimization, advertising optimization. Seems like a lot of our customers are starting to see that that's where the big lifts can be had.
Gotcha. Yeah. So maybe for people listening, what would be an example of something like that where you're talking about like advertising automation? Yeah, it sounds pretty fancy.
Yeah. So there's a lot of for those of us who have worked with an agency or created, for example, a display ad, just the process of creating a display ad. First of all, you got to create, 6 sizes or something like that. That's not a lot of heavy lifting, but actually the process of picture advertising a community that's in Atlanta, Georgia. You got to find the images, you got to find the from pricing, you got to find the text you want to put. And then you give the asset to a designer, they go through their iterations, then there's a review process. So that's not really value added time. It's just creating a routine thing. So on the automation front, one of the things we've done is develop an automation suite. So using feed data, we can pipe that feed data into ad templates. So in real time or once a day, we can create basically every iteration of display or search or Facebook ads that dynamically create for communities, plans, or move-in ready homes. So what it allows us to do is move from the rote task of creating ads into getting those ads into market very quickly, so we can spend time doing more value-added stuff like strategy, targeting, optimization, and such.
Yeah, that's cool. And so for people that haven't done a ton in the advertising space, and like, how is there a minimum threshold where you kind of need to be spending like either X amount of dollars, or you're running a certain number of campaigns where like the automation starts to become a true value add versus, oh, I'm just kind of like doing a couple campaigns, so it's like going through that process doesn't make sense?
Yeah. So a couple things. I guess just initially on the advertising front, there tends to be, digital's by definition super agile, and you can scale it and be very specific and targeted. But there's this inclination, which we have to coach on, is yes, digital is all of those things, but also there's a tendency to spread too thinly. So for example, it's really easy to say, yeah, let's target within a 5-mile radius of a community or a product or whatever. But let's expand it to, like, since we can really easy, let's spend it 20 miles out or 40 miles out. But we routinely provide numbers back and say, yeah, we sure can, but now you're spread way too thinly, so you're not going to get enough volume at all to, get enough clicks or enough quality clicks or people to your website. So that's the first thing on the ad spend front. And then on the automation front, at least how our model is priced, is it's all variable. So if you have one community or 400 communities, it's all based on the community count. So in every use case, it saves creative time, it saves internal review and QA time, et cetera. So there's value irrespective of how big you are. But on the ad budget side, that's where, there needs to be some, rein people in and really be effective with the ad spend.
Yeah, it feels like too, some of these platforms, like you've got to at least be spending a chunk for like the platforms to do their self-optimization, like run enough data through like the campaigns to actually get some, we like to in marketing talk about A/B tests and split testing and all these things, but if you don't test with enough data, then you're just making bad decisions. Do you find that's the case, or like how do you approach just that perspective of letting enough data go through some of these before you start making decisions like that?
Yeah. The hardest part is setting the expectations first. On one is like the duration of the test, because a test to be statistically significant could take a day or it could take 6 weeks.
Sure.
And some of it has to certainly do with the more volume you pipe through it. It tends to go, tests seem to net out and find winners more quickly. But like you mentioned, take like Google AdWords, for example, there's a lot of native, they call it testing, but it's more of they can help you figure out which one is best. And then they dynamically start serving that. So if you have an A and a B in very short order, Google will get enough impressions or whatever you set your goal on, to actually understand which one's doing best based on your goal, be it lead conversion or whatever. But what it doesn't tell you is why. So it'll say this ad works better than this ad, but when you start getting into like multivariate tests and all these different things, then it takes more active management, more creative sets. And then to your point, you do need a larger budget just to, if you take a year's worth of money, you could absolutely run any test, but you don't want to spend all of your money in 2 weeks. So there is just by default a budget concern in that expectation. Like, yeah, we can test, but it's not just the cost of the advertising and the ad management. It also, there's just some hard labor involved in setting up the test, managing the test, watching the test, reporting on the test, et cetera.
Yeah. And I'm sure we could spend, hours and hours just talking about testing, but people would probably get super bored with that pretty quickly, especially our audience, probably not getting super deep into the technical weeds there. But maybe just from like a global perspective, as you're running a lot of these ads, are you finding, where are you driving them? Is there certain types of content or certain kinds of destinations that you're finding are like really resonating with, the audiences right now?
Yeah. So because budgets are limited, we tend to want lower funnel buyers. And for example, like search advertising, customers actually typing in and they're telling us where they want to live or how much or product type. So knowing that we're already appealing to a lower funnel person, we try to direct that person as deep into the site as possible. So rarely, if ever, we land someone on the homepage. If you're picturing, okay, we've got an Atlanta division with multiple communities, very rarely we'll land them on a division page. More likely than not, we try to drop that person on a plan page that appeals to their price point on top of their geo. So we try to get them as far into the site as possible. And then from a campaign perspective, let's just say we're doing a Christmas campaign and driving people to a campaign page. It's traditional lead conversion stuff where, you want to have a lead capture form, you want to have it above the fold. So drive people as deep as possible into the site from their first click. And then also just basic, have a form on every page that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's still a lot of people that are caught up in driving to the homepage, like you said, and the more hyper specific you can get, the better. And
For
with
sure.
digital, like you have that data, like you said, you know a lot about this person. So why just punt them onto the homepage and have
Mhm.
them fish for something? So
Yeah.
no, that's awesome. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. I know you're doing some things with kind of video and virtual reality and self-guided
Mhm.
tours. I guess, especially this year, I think some of those are kind of being the awareness is being raised on those and like how important those are. But I guess let's pick off one of them. Kind of the um, self-guided tours. I saw you had a few things on your site and some things that you guys are doing there. Um, how are you seeing those being utilized and in kind of what capacity there?
Yeah, so we developed this product. It's kind of akin to a museum tour on your cell phone, and it has a lot of use cases beyond just it originated with COVID, where sales centers were closed or had limited by appointment sorts of situations, uh, coupled with the business need of still needing to get customers out, and then sometimes customers also weren't comfortable having a salesperson with them just from exposure. And then when we looked just historically, there are customers who walk into a sales center that don't want to be accompanied by a rep anyway. So our self-guided tour it's a web app, so it's super easy. You don't need to download any app or anything. You just go to a URL, which you can access through a QR code, or just type it in verbatim. So when you're walking into that house by yourself, you're not just left to your own devices. You can walk in and get a feel real quickly if the floor plan meets your needs. But when a salesperson is with you, they can talk about the intentionality of the floor plan. How the light from the windows was strategic. How separating the master from the guest room was strategic, and how you could feel about living there. So the self-guided tour takes content that's available for a specific plan, be it photography, Matterports, written content. We could do embed voice recordings. So when that customer's in the house, they can get what we consider as best of a lead experience as possible without a salesperson.
Yeah, yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, I would imagine there's probably a number of use cases there. I'm curious too about stuff like this. Like, how easy is that to create, for
Mm-hmm.
a builder where they're going, okay, like I have to record, like basically dummy record, like I'm walking somebody through, or, like what does
Yeah.
that process look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one of those things is, you know, certainly we can embed any sort of content that we're provided with, or we could produce it. So if you want to do voice recordings, we can help facilitate that. But that's a huge barrier to entry, as we found. The other barrier is, okay, it makes sense to create one of these, but I've got, just in one model park, I have 6 models. So how do I create 6 of them? And how we envision it is a microsite. So once we develop the template for the microsite, it makes it very easy to feed in dynamically the content, images, Matterports, written word, right into there. So we can replicate these mobile microsites extremely quickly at scale. And the other cool thing I forgot to mention was one of the more important pieces of it is, since a customer is not with a salesperson, the sales team can't get real-time feedback. Salesperson normally ask them, what do you think about this kitchen? So we've included an array of different survey types of rating scales and such that the users prompted with, for example, like, how many stars would you give this kitchen? What do you think about it? And then that data is captured, sent to the salesperson. But to your point, producing additional content, you run up against the same thing that most companies have, is you got to build the content. But if
Yep.
the content's already there, we provide a nice template that we can dynamically populate.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a huge barrier for most people. Like, oh, I got to shoot this video, or I got to record
Mm-hmm.
this or create this
Mm-hmm.
documentation. And I don't know. My message always like, just start doing it, because this stuff isn't going away. Like there's just more and more use cases for how to utilize content that you've already
Mm-hmm.
created and scale it out, right? To your point, like now you don't necessarily need a salesperson in there. Maybe you want somebody, but if the customer is a little more comfortable. I feel like, I guess I'm curious, have you heard any feedback from people that are using the self-guided tours? Because I don't know, it seems like consumers like to do all their own stuff these days. Like I'll always go to the self checkout if I can, and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Like, are people liking it, or are they saying like, oh, I needed to ask these questions and there's nobody here to talk to?
Yeah, so really the biggest feedback is it it to a degree replaces some of the work that a salesperson would need to do. So there is some pushback from the sales organizations,
I would
even
imagine.
though
Yeah.
financially you're taking care of a customer, meeting them on their own terms, offering them self checkout if they want it, so customer experience satisfaction is higher. You maybe don't have to use as many salespeople. Like the salesperson doesn't need to occupy their time with someone who's just looking for the first time. You get more intelligence from the self-guided tour that goes right into a CRM, satisfaction, dwell time, and like how long did they spend in the kitchen? Did they engage with this content? So huge value proposition, but honestly, it's the feedback is the adoption from sales is challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine, and there's always kind of that been that kind of tug of war between marketing and sales, over the years. And
Yeah.
but I feel like part of it too is just some of this technology, like you said, it's putting the customer in a better spot or a more comfortable spot, or
Mm-hmm.
it's and that's kind of the what we've been talking about here at Builder Funnel is like, hey, today with your marketing process, like all you're trying to do is just match and mirror the way people like to shop and buy. And people
Mm-hmm.
kind of like to do stuff on their own terms and get really far in the sales process before they actually have to talk to somebody. And so it seems like things like this enable that person to do that. And to your point too, like I can imagine all the data you're capturing, like you said, dwell time and
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I was in this room, I give this kitchen a 4 out of 5. Like a sales rep isn't capturing that data, and if they are, they're not putting it in a CRM, let's be honest. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
so
the other,
that's
you mentioned how your builder funnel, how you're, conceptually, it's like, well, let's talk about the customer experience. One thing, early on, and it's still something we talk about a lot, is our experiences as consumers. Like we're used to experiencing a web experience like on Amazon, or when we walk into a retail store where, our experience in a home builder, we have expectations, right? We have
mhm.
expectations based on how we interact with other brands.
Yes.
So what we've been trying to do for a long time is just say, why are we trying to recreate the wheel? Why should a home builder have, granted, it's a high purchase value item and most expensive thing most people ever buy, understood that. But why would they have any different experience, particularly in digital? It's easy to use. You find what you're looking for very quickly. There's no barriers. There's fewer clicks. All those same sort of things should apply. There's videos. There's customer reviews. There's photography. Very articulate descriptions. So we try to move. We've been trying to move clients there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because like we talk about it, we're in an Amazon world, where we're
Mhm.
used to, just that experience, which represents like choice and speed and, all those different things. And so people just start wanting that everywhere,
Mhm.
not just with Amazon. And so, yeah, I think that's a really good point you make is like, how do we start to bridge that gap between what that experience looks like and what it could look like?
Mhm.
I imagine too, that's maybe where some of the like virtual reality stuff comes in too, because if somebody can't actually be there, in
Mhm.
person, I guess what are you guys seeing in kind of that world?
Yeah, I guess the first thing is it is encouraging and remarkable, is just part of the builder ecosystem, how quickly the industry spooled up to be able to do, I'll just call it virtual sales, like figured out Zoom and Microsoft Teams and GoToMeeting. And then what we saw really quickly is everyone got on board. Like there was parity. It's like, okay, we've arrived. We can like do virtual meetings. Sweet.
Yes.
All right, we've got like other assets like videos and Matterports. We can like share a screen and go through that. What we saw was Okay, well that's great. But what are some of the things that aren't being accomplished? Well, not all salespeople like using technology. Okay, so that's a barrier. When they are on a video and they're sharing a screen and a customer says, "Hey, let me check out plan A," then the salesperson needs to go to plan A, navigate around the website, and then heaven forbid the customer says, "Let me interact with that floor plan," or "Let me go to plan B," or "Let me check this other thing." Now you've got the salesperson navigating a website. So you have two problems. One is the salespeople, and this is not meant to be offensive, aren't web experts. They don't know how to navigate. The second thing is all websites aren't built super easy to use. So now the customer experience, and when I'm trying to give you a professional presentation for a very expensive product, it doesn't go very well.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of creating new video technology or creating more assets, where we have approached this is creating a solution that makes that experience, the delivery of that information more seamless. We call it our virtual concierge. And what it enables is a salesperson to deliver all of their information significantly quicker, significantly more professional, and makes it really easy to move between communities, plans, specs, all from a single admin panel. So, and very easy, very intuitive to use. So when you're talking to a customer, there's no downtime, there's no lag, there's no clicking the wrong thing. There's no, here's a great example of you're looking at plan A and the customer says, "Do you have anything ready for that? Do you have a move-in ready for that?" And some websites have it, some don't. But you still have to go poke around for it right from the admin panel. We know, right, you'll be able to see right away. It's like, I have 3 inventory, plan A, click, here it is. So that's how we've approached moving our company forward into the virtual space, is more or less enabling existing virtual technology.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so where do you feel like the future of this is going? Like if we fast forward 3, 5, 10 years, I don't know, pick your timeline, but
Sure.
what do you think the experience will look like with some of this different technology and the way consumers and salespeople interact? Like, are people just going to be shopping online and buying, kind of like, are we going to get to Amazon like one click, and maybe it's not ready in 2 days, but start the build?
Yeah, that's something I think selling a house online is something we see a lot chasing, and we're trying to help there. Again, it kind of comes down to this you know, marketing sales cultural challenge issue
Mm-hmm.
of it's going to be really hard, in my opinion, for a builder, especially any size builder, to just say, "We're not going to have a model park."
Yeah.
And in my opinion, well, I think walking into a model home it's very important,
Yeah.
especially, I mean, I wouldn't go personally buy a house sight unseen. I know I've already heard of people who have,
Yeah,
particularly in
people do
like,
it. It's crazy. Yeah, and they'll even waive like inspections and all kinds of stuff.
yeah, I mean, it does happen. I think there's different rules for new home builders versus townhome builders versus resale
For
home
sure.
buyers. I think there's different use cases. But back to your initial question, I mean, we've already worked with wearing goggles and looking around and doing all that sort of thing. But that experience is within a sales center. So, for example, we had a client who was building a, you know, 30-story luxury condo product, and it just wasn't built yet. So that the business model there is they pre-sell all that. So in order to
Hmm.
do that, renderings were created, and all that, so you could like pan and zoom with the goggles on, and they sold it all out. They would have sold it all out without the VR technology. So I think there's a couple things. One is there's got to be a culture change in order to take advantage of any of this technology. Two, I think technology is becoming more readily available and easy to use.
Hmm.
So that's good. And then three, there needs to be a consumer shift to being okay with that. So I know a lot of the like augmented reality and those sorts of things are good. I see, like, I've been looking a lot at augmented reality from a how do we do away with collateral? How do we do away with
Yeah.
sales sheets and documents? And then also, how do we make that material sticky? How I describe it is How do you make your material worth keeping on your coffee table versus throwing away? And I
Yeah.
think something like augmented reality would be very beneficial there. But it gets back to your comment earlier about you still got to produce content. All it is more content.
Yeah.
So content's a huge thing. So the tech's already there in other businesses, but I think the home building industry has a lot of organic challenges that it needs to overcome.
Yeah, and it seems like probably, to your point, just part of the culture shift is maybe salespeople adopting the content
Mm.
mindset and saying, okay, how can I scale this conversation that I just had with this one prospect by
Mhm.
recording something or creating a piece of content and then using the tech? But uh, easier said than done, as we know. There's a few barriers there.
Yeah.
But Brian, you mentioned several like kind of different technology pieces today throughout our conversation. I guess for people listening, like if this is all kind of new to them, or they haven't really thought a lot
Mhm.
about this, what would be a couple of good first steps for people to start taking to get their feet wet, jump into some of the tech, and maybe it's a use case, maybe it's a certain type of tech, I don't know. But I think a lot of times there is that kind of like, I don't know, like I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. So what would be your like call to action for people to like get involved and start pushing down this road?
Yeah, I really think they need to extract themselves from home building. Creating technology and content just for home building is, I'll just call it complicated. It's going to take a while, but go experience this and play with it for yourself in a different industry.
Mm,
Like attend a virtual conference. Like that's an easy one. They're all happen all over the place. Just see what that consumer interaction's like, see what it's like navigating around. And that I consider that low tech. Like go experience what that looks like. Number two is start playing with physical technology like Oculus Rift and those sorts of things, and don't play games with it. Like there's all sorts of content out there that you can go swim with whales and do all these different things. Go just see what that feels like. So I would say go out, and whether it's a small team or yourself, depending on your organization, just go experience it and just see what it feels like. And then, again, depending on how your organization is structured, it's going to require a combination of marketing and IT. Marketing
yeah.
and IT. Of course, sales needs to get in there, but from what we've seen, marketing and IT drive these sorts of discussions because marketing's got to produce the content. IT needs to work on acquiring the technology.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good advice. I feel like once you feel it for yourself, you go, oh, like that's the feeling I want my customers to have.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's great. Well, Brian, I've got one last segment of the show, but before we get to that, if people want to learn more about your company and kind of what you're up to, like what's the best way to get connected with you or learn more?
Sure. OCTperformance.com. That's our advertising agency. Then some of the automated products we're talking about, that's at automated.digital. And then, of course, all the content and information can be found under Brian Barrett on LinkedIn.
Cool. And we'll put some links in the show notes for everybody as well. But Brian, we got one final segment. We call this our Fast Five. So I'm just going to hit you with 5 rapid fire questions. Say whatever comes to mind. Um, First question is, what is your favorite business book and why?
Good to great.
Good to great.
Um, I just think it's really, you know, it's got great stats. It always surprises me how watching why some businesses succeed and fail, particularly in the context of like, 20 years from now, is Google going to be here?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah. No, that's a really good one. I feel like that's a book that stood the test of time and it's, yeah, still super applicable.
Yeah.
Next question is, who is the most inspirational person in your life?
My mom, she wrote a paper, geez, probably 30 or 40 years ago, which was analyzing how the government could use this thing called the internet. Yeah, so it's super fascinating. The
That's
context she
awesome.
has for today, I mean, there's been context for decades. So she, aside from being like a great knowledge repository, I mean, she encourages me to be entrepreneurial.
That's super cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, definitely forward thinking. That's awesome. All right. If you could have one superpower, what would that be?
I don't know what it's called, but being 5 places at once.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
We could all use that.
Yeah.
All right. Describe yourself in 3 words.
Oh man. Creative, analytical, and family-oriented.
Nice. Yeah, snuck it in there. Cool. All right. Final question is, if you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice, what would that be?
Digital advertising and marketing is the future. You can do small things like improve 1% per month and experience tremendous results. So get a good partner in the space, keep investing with it, and don't rest on your laurels.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, good advice. Well, Brian, I appreciate you spending the time with me today.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.